If you guys remember last week, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we were doing, that thing with people and stuff. It's a pretty good week, huh? And over the course of those 3 days, you heard several people talk to you about going deeper in your relationship with Jesus. And what I want to actually do tonight is I want to take an inventory of the last few months in our lives and see what's happened, all right? So let me ask you this. Who in here went to youth camp? All right, cool. All right, so let me ask you, how was it?
Awesome.
Oh,
There's nothing you could trade in the world for.
yeah? So here's the thing, is a lot of you guys who went to youth camp had this life-changing experience with God. Yes or no? Yeah. Then when we came home, here's the thing is we came home and then we had to break. We had to take a break from being together for a short period as COVID hit our communities like really hard. And a few of you have even just started coming back since like this whole pandemic thing started, right? So right now, I want everyone to close your eyes for a moment, all right? Everyone close your eyes. I'll wait on all you guys. Everybody close your eyes. I don't want you to answer this out loud. This is a question for you to seriously think about for yourself. Think back to before you took a break from us being together. Think back to when you were at youth camp or when you were you encountered God in a very real way. Think back to that. Now I want you to ask yourself, how does your relationship with God then compared to your relationship with God now? Think about it. Okay, you can look at me now. If you're honest with yourselves, a lot of you guys are probably saying that your relationship with God is not quite the same now as it was then. And I know that we were only apart for just a couple of weeks, and we've been back together for a while now. But I'm not talking about just being in church. I'm talking about your personal relationship with God. And listen, I completely understand. I know what it's like to be in this situation. All right? So this isn't like, some guy's going to stand up here and shake a fist at you kind of a thing, because I've been in this boat too, okay? I understand. Especially when we're not around others who are encouraging us in our relationship with God. Or the simple fact that our lives are busy and full of commitments. But in all of that, Jesus needs to come first, no matter what. So tonight we're going to discuss this and see that it's never too late to get back into the habit of following Jesus. So for the next couple weeks, we're going to talk about getting back into it. And whether out of necessity or because of circumstances beyond our control or the busyness of life or just deciding to do something else, sometimes we end up taking a break from something or someone we love. Let me ask you this. Who in here likes basketball? Enough of you guys are out there on the court playing it. All right? So a lot of you guys should know who Michael Jordan is, right? You guys know who Michael Jordan is? You don't even have to like basketball and who that guy is. Okay, so in case you didn't know, Jackson, he's one of the greatest players to have ever played the game of basketball. And no matter who you think the GOAT is, even almost 2 decades after he stopped playing, Jordan is always in the conversation of the greatest of all time. Who do you think the GOAT is right now? Khourie? I'm asking you guys.
He has the most long-range shots of anybody.
Okay. Does anybody else have another player? Anybody else have another player other than Khourie who they think's the GOAT?
Wait, time out though. Nathan just said Shaq, and I want to point something out. It is back in their prime time. Shaq saw Michael Jordan in pain.
Yeah, he did. I've seen.
Okay.
Michael Jordan was
So he says Shaq. He says Khourie. Anybody else?
the closest other person, Stephen Curry, would be Kobe.
Kobe. Okay, Kobe.
I claim Shaq was
Sit down. That's not necessary. Hey. Sit. Thank you. Thank you. You know, that's not necessary. You know you're on camera, right? Hi, Facebook. Hi, YouTube. Oh, my goodness. I apologize. That is uncalled for, sir. All right, so here's the thing. All right, let's reel this back in. No matter who you think is the greatest of all time, no matter who you think the GOAT is, all right? No matter if it's Kobe or that guy or Durant or Curry. No, we're talking about basketball here. All right? No matter who you think it is, you got to admit that Jordan is always in the conversation. Here's the thing is, if you don't even know him for his athletics, you definitely know him for his shoes. He hasn't, Space Jam, what? The real one. He hasn't played for almost, here's the thing is Jordan hasn't played since before most of you guys were born. But still, more Jordan branded shoes and apparel are being sold than the signature lines of every other current NBA player combined. Yes. So if you don't know him for his balling, you definitely know him for his shoes. All right? So, Michael Jordan loves basketball. That guy is all about basketball. And this is a big news. Well, let me get there, all right? All right, hey, shh. I need you guys to focus, all right? I need you guys to focus, all right? You're embarrassing me in front of Facebook. Golly, guys, come on. All right, no, seriously, though, because I was literally about to say that. So this was a big story back in the day. In 1993, Jordan retired from playing basketball in the NBA. And for almost 2 years, yes, he did pursue a career playing minor league baseball. Only to make the simple announcement in 1995, I'm back. That's all he said in the press conference was, I'm back. And then he returned to playing in the NBA. And in his second game back, he scored 55 points. The guy was still good. 2 years away from the game, he comes back, second game back, and he hammers 55 points into the net. So Michael Jordan loves basketball. And his brief time away showed him he didn't want to be away from it. And sometimes, here's the thing, guys, it can be like that for us following Jesus and being with others who encourage us in our relationship with him. Have you guys ever heard the saying, it's just like riding a bike? What does that mean? Once you learn it, you don't forget it. That's pretty accurate description of that. So, once you learn how to ride a bike, you can come back to it years later. After years of not riding, you can hop right back on that bike and ride it just like you'd never stopped riding it. Just like riding a bike. It's because muscle memory kicks in and you're quickly able to do what was once familiar to you. Because it's familiar and it's comfortable. Once you learn how to ride a bike, it's easy to go back to that because it's familiar and it's comfortable. Here's the thing is muscle memory and sin are similar. Returning to doing what was familiar and comfortable with us is as easy as riding a bike. If you're taking notes, write this down. I forgot to put this up there, but I'll repeat it a couple times. If you're taking notes, write this down. Returning to sin is just like riding a bike. Returning to sin is just like riding a bike. So there is some part of us that never forgets. And if we're honest, the enemy will use this to make us desire to fall back to the life that we had before we had that life-changing encounter with Jesus. When you were at youth camp, or you were like in this place where you had this life-changing encounter with Jesus, and then you're away from that moment, and you're not around others who are encouraging you in your relationship with Jesus. How's that relationship doing after a few weeks of that? For a few weeks following youth camp, and to be honest, during a lot over the past 2 years, we experienced a time when our ability to get together with others who encourage us in our relationship with Jesus is diminished some. And sometimes choosing to live with that fire inside of you and pursuing Jesus the same way that he pursues you can seem a lot more challenging than going back to what is familiar and what is comfortable. Let's take a look at someone in the Bible who was in a similar situation. John chapter 21, verses 1 through 14. John chapter 21, verses 1 through 14 says this. Later, Jesus appeared again to the disciples beside the Sea of Galilee. This is how it happened. Several of the disciples were there. Simon Peter, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples. Simon Peter said, I'm going fishing. We'll come too, they all said. So they went out into the boat, but they caught nothing all night. At dawn, Jesus was standing on the beach, but the disciples couldn't see who it was. He called out, fellows, have you caught any fish? No, they replied. Then he said, throw out your net on the right-hand side of the boat, and you'll get some. Now, I don't know if you know anything about a boat, but the fish on this side and the fish on this side, it's the same thing, right? So he says, throw out your net on the right-hand side of the boat, and you'll get some. So they did. And they couldn't haul in the net because there were so many fish in it. Then the disciple that Jesus loved said to Peter, it's the Lord. And when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his tunic, for he was stripped for work. He jumped into the water, and he headed to the shore. The others stayed with the boat and pulled the loaded net to shore, for they were only about 100 yards from shore. And when they got there, they found breakfast waiting for them, fish cooking over a charcoal fire, and some bread. Bring some of the fish you caught, Jesus said. So Simon Peter went aboard and dragged the net to shore. There were 153 large fish, and yet the net hadn't torn. So come and have some breakfast, Jesus said. None of the disciples dared ask him, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. Then Jesus served them bread and the fish. And this was the 3rd time that Jesus had appeared to his disciples since he had been raised from the dead. So here's the thing. Let's break this down. A lot like our experience with having a life-changing encounter with Jesus, then going back to what is familiar and what is comfortable, here's Peter in the same situation. Peter definitely had a life-changing encounter with Jesus. Before he met Jesus, Peter was a fisherman. And he wasn't even named Peter. His name was actually Simon. And when he encountered Jesus, Jesus blows Peter's mind by telling him to cast out his fishing nets again after a long night of working hard. And they caught absolutely nothing. They worked really hard all night and they caught nothing. And here comes Jesus, and Jesus is like, you know what? Cast your nets out again. But when Peter does it this time, his nets are so full of fish that they begin to tear. And the Bible tells us that as soon as they got back to shore, that they left everything and they followed Jesus. So Peter goes from being a fisherman to being a fisher of men. That's what Jesus says. I'm going to make you a fisher of men. You're going to be a fisher for people now. So he goes from being a fisherman to being a fisher of men. And he goes from being a person who is going nowhere in life to being a person with a purpose. And Jesus even changes his name from Simon to Peter. You know why he changes his name to Peter? Because Peter means rock. Petra in the Greek is the word for rock. And that's what we say Peter. So he calls him Peter. He calls him rock because Jesus tells him that he is the rock that Jesus will build his church upon. So Peter spends 3 years in the presence of Jesus, doing ministry together, doing life together. He has this encounter, this life-changing encounter with Jesus. Then Jesus, can you imagine being at youth camp for 3 years? Having that kind of experience for 3 years straight? Peter is in the presence of Jesus for 3 years, in the physical presence of Jesus. Then Jesus is taken and put on trial. He's crucified. And then 3 days later, resurrection from the grave, just like he said. And after his resurrection, Jesus had already appeared to the disciples a couple of times. Here's the thing that blows my mind. The disciples aren't out in the world telling everyone the good news that Jesus is alive. What are they doing? The disciples went back to what they knew. They went back to what they were familiar with and what they were comfortable with before they met Jesus. Just like riding a bike. So we see here in John chapter 21 that Peter returned to fishing. Because where was he at before he met Jesus? He was fishing. And so Peter goes back to what he's comfortable with, what he's familiar with. He goes back to fishing. Peter and several of the other disciples went out in the boat, but they caught nothing all night long. That sound familiar to you? Jesus shows up. And although they don't know it's him, and in a repeat of when Peter first met Jesus in Luke chapter 5, Jesus tells them to cast out their nets again. So they cast their nets. They catch so many fish that they couldn't even haul it in. And then they realize that Jesus is again in their midst. So check this out. Peter doesn't just return to fishing. He returns to unsuccessful fishing. And he has to be reminded of God's power. Think about it. When Jesus first met Peter, he was hauling in empty nets. When he went back to what was familiar, he was still hauling in empty nets. That man was going nowhere. If you're taking notes, write this down. Going back to what I was doing before I encountered Jesus will not be as fulfilling as I think. Going back to what I was doing before I encountered Jesus would not be as fulfilling as I think. So there's something comfortable in the familiar. And that is what tries to draw us to return back to it. But what's more comforting is to know that Jesus seeks out sinners over and over again. We see in John chapter 21 that Jesus sought out Peter just as he seeks us out. Peter is the one who said that he would never deny Jesus, only to deny him 3 times. No matter how many times Peter denied Jesus, Jesus kept returning to seek him out. And he does the same thing for each and every one of us. Jesus does the same thing for you. If you're taking notes, write this down. Jesus desires to be in a relationship with me, and he seeks me out. Jesus desires to be in a relationship with me, and he seeks me out. You need to know that there is no such thing as a useless person in the kingdom of heaven. Nor is there someone who is beyond forgiveness. So after Peter promises Jesus that he will never deny you, I will never deny you, Jesus. I'll even go to death with you. I will never deny you. Peter tells this to Jesus. Then he turns around, and that very same night that he says this, he denies Jesus 3 times. After Peter sees that Jesus has risen from the dead, he still goes back to what's familiar and comfortable. But Jesus still pursues Peter. If you read on past verse 14 in John chapter 21, you'll see that Jesus again takes Peter from a person that's going nowhere to a person with purpose. He comes to Peter a lot like when they first met. And he tells Peter to feed his sheep or pastor his people. And just like he did when he first met Peter, again, Jesus says, follow me. It's like Jesus hit the reset button on their relationship. Think about this. You've got Peter out in the boat, and Jesus calls out to him, follow me. I'm going to make you a fisher of men. Now here's Peter, after having that encounter with Jesus, being in the physical presence of Jesus for 3 years. Here he is, going back to what he was comfortable and familiar with. Instead of doing what Jesus had called him to do, he went back to being a very unsuccessful fisherman. And here's Jesus again saying, Peter, follow me. I'm still going to make you the rock that I build my church on. Follow me. He hit that reset button. So here's the thing is, if you turn the page to the book of Acts, John chapter 21 is the very last chapter of John. And if you turn the page to the book of Acts, you see that Peter did choose to leave the familiar and the comfortable behind. He hit that reset button and he chose to follow Jesus and to fulfill his purpose Jesus had for him. Peter did just as Jesus asked. He fed his sheep. Peter became a shepherd or a pastor to Jesus' people. And in doing so, Peter became the rock that Jesus built his church on. So just like Peter, you can see it's never too late to get back into the habit of following Jesus. And when we get back into it, we also have the opportunity to share Jesus with someone else like Peter or like us who may have stopped pursuing Jesus and instead may have gone back to what is familiar and comfortable for them. What they knew before a life-changing encounter with Jesus. It's an act of love to remind someone of the one who loves them endlessly, Jesus. Like Leo Tolstoy once wrote, if I stagger and lose the way, you must help me. You must keep me on the true path, just as I am ready to support you. Sometimes we need someone to help us get back into it. And that's why it's so important to be around others who encourage you in your relationship with Jesus. You saw how easy it was when we weren't together for just a few short weeks. Where did your relationship go during that time when you didn't have people encouraging you in your relationship with Jesus? So let me ask you this. In what way do you need to get back into it with your relationship with Jesus? What do you need to get back into when it comes to participating in encouraging others in their relationship with Jesus? Who do you know who could use a supportive friend as they navigate getting back into pursuing Jesus? When following Jesus gets hard, avoid the temptation to fall back into doing what is familiar and what is comfortable. So here's your challenge for this week. Take an honest look at your relationship with Jesus. Is it where it needs to be? Have you gone back to what is familiar and what is comfortable before you had an encounter with Jesus? Next, commit to choosing to pursue Jesus like he pursues you. I want you to start each day with a devotion in the Bible and spending time talking with God. Ask him to show you how he pursues you and how you can pursue him. And then 3, if you know someone who is struggling with their relationship with Jesus, encourage them. Encourage them in their relationship. Let them know that God still loves them and that Jesus wants to hit that reset button on their relationship. Let them know that they can get back into it and that we're here to help. That's your challenge for this week. Take an honest look at your relationship with Jesus. Commit to choosing to pursue Jesus like he pursues you. And if you know someone who's struggling with their relationship with Jesus, encourage them as well. Father, I love you. And I thank you so much for loving each and every one of us. I pray, Father, that you help us if we need to hit that reset button, if we've gone back to what's comfortable and familiar, if we've run back to the sins, the things that kept us away from you before our encounter with you. Because it's easy, it's familiar, it's comfortable. Father, help us to understand that we can quickly hit that reset button. That you're not far away. All we have to do is turn around and you're right there. Help us, Father God, to understand the depths of your love. Show us how you pursue us, how you seek after us, and give us the desire to seek after you the same way that you seek after us. I love you, Lord, and I thank you so much for your great love for each and every one of us. It's in your precious and holy name, Jesus, we pray. Amen.